The dust cloud rising behind the stagecoach was the only warning Sarah Catherine had before the wheels hit another rut, nearly throwing her from her seat. She gripped the worn leather strap above the window and pressed her other hand against the letter folded in her dress pocket. The paper soft from countless readings over the past 3 weeks of travel. Her sister Margaret's handwriting had been shaky, the words rushed, but the message was clear. She needed help, and she was somewhere outside Las Vegas, New Mexico territory, working at a ranch owned by a man named Henry Callahan. The year was 1878, and Sarah had left everything behind in St. Louis to make this journey. Her teaching position, her modest room at the boarding house, her routine that had felt safe and predictable. All of it abandoned the moment she received that letter 2 months ago. Margaret had been gone for nearly a year, chasing dreams of adventure and independence out west. Their parents had died of influenza 3 years prior, leaving just the 2 sisters to navigate the world alone. Margaret was 23, headstrong and brave in ways Sarah had never been. Sarah herself had just turned 21 last month, spending her birthday alone, worrying about her sister instead of celebrating. Las Vegas, 10 minutes, the driver called down, and Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She smoothed her traveling dress, gray and practical, now covered in a fine layer of New Mexico dust. Her dark blonde hair had long since fallen from its careful arrangement, strands sticking to her neck in the oppressive heat. Through the window, she could see the town emerging from the landscape, adobe buildings and wooden structures that looked nothing like the brick and stone of St. Louis. The stagecoach rattled to a stop outside a building marked as the station, and Sarah gathered her carpetbag and small trunk. The driver helped her down, his weathered face kind despite his gruff manner. The heat hit her immediately, dry and intense, so different from the humid summers she was accustomed to. "Thank you, sir," she said, accepting her trunk. "You got people meeting you, miss?" He asked, concern evident in his tone. "I am looking for someone," Sarah replied, pulling out the letter. "The Callahan Ranch, do you know where I might find it?" The driver scratched his chin. "Sure do. About 8 miles northwest of town, but that's a fair ride. You might want to arrange for a horse or wagon." Sarah nodded, trying not to show her anxiety. 8 miles. She had come over 1,000 miles, what was 8 more? But exhaustion pulled at her bones, and the thought of another journey, no matter how short, felt overwhelming. "There's a stable down the street," the driver continued. "Tell Jim that Frank sent you. He will set you up fair." 20 minutes later, Sarah was negotiating with a stable owner named Jim, a portly man with kind eyes who seemed concerned about a lone woman heading out to a ranch. "The Callahan place is respectable," Jim assured her, "but it's still unusual for a lady to go riding out alone. You sure you do not want me to send my son with you?" "I appreciate your concern, but I will manage," Sarah said firmly. She had not come this far to lose courage now. She paid for the rental of a gentle mare and received directions that seemed straightforward enough. "Follow the main road north, turn west at the split pine, keep going until you see the fence line." The ride took longer than she expected. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness, so different from anything she had known. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing. Scrub, brush, and juniper dotted the rolling terrain. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Sarah was grateful for her bonnet, though she could feel the heat penetrating her dress. Her thoughts circled constantly around Margaret. What had happened? Why had her letters become so infrequent, and why had that last one sounded so desperate? Margaret had written that she was working as a cook at the ranch, that the owner was fair but demanding, that the work was harder than she had imagined. But there had been something else, something unspoken that made Sarah's stomach clench with worry. When the fence line finally appeared, Sarah felt a wave of relief so strong she nearly cried. The ranch sprawled across a valley, corrals and outbuildings scattered around a main house that was larger than she had anticipated. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see several men working near the barns. As she rode closer, one of them noticed her and called out to others. A man emerged from the largest barn, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat shading his face. He walked toward her with long, purposeful strides, and Sarah felt suddenly self-conscious about her disheveled appearance. When he got close enough, he removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of the sky at dawn, somewhere between blue and gray. "Can I help you, madam?" His voice was deep, cautious, but not unfriendly. Sarah dismounted, grateful when her legs did not buckle beneath her. "I am looking for Henry Callahan. You found him." He studied her with those keen eyes, taking in her travel-worn appearance, the determination in her stance. "What brings you all the way out here, my sister?" Sarah said, and her voice cracked despite her efforts to sound composed. "Margaret Carpenter. She wrote to me that she was working here as a cook. I need to see her." Something flickered across Henry's face, an expression Sarah could not quite read. Concern, pity. He replaced his hat and glanced back toward the house. "Let's get you out of this sun," he said. "Your sister is in the house. She has been unwell." Fear shot through Sarah's chest. Unwell. "What happened? Is she injured?" "Nothing like that," Henry said quickly. "But she has been poorly for about a week now, fever and such. My housekeeper has been tending to her. Come on, I will take you to her." Sarah followed him across the yard, barely noticing the men who had stopped working to watch them pass. All her attention was focused on the house ahead, on the sister who waited inside. Henry led her through a door into a kitchen that was surprisingly spacious and well-appointed. A large woman with gray hair looked up from kneading dough, her eyes widening. "Mrs. Potter, this is Margaret's sister," Henry said. "Oh, thank the Lord," Mrs. Potter exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron. "She has been asking for you, dear. Come, come." They led her through the house to a small bedroom on the first floor. The curtains were drawn against the heat, leaving the room in cool shadow. In the bed, looking small and pale, was Margaret. Sarah rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the bed. "Maggie," she whispered, using the childhood name. Margaret's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then widening with recognition. "Sarah, is that really you?" Her voice was hoarse, weak. "I came as soon as I got your letter," Sarah said, taking her sister's hot hand. Margaret was burning with fever, her hair damp with sweat. "What happened to you?" "Just a foolish cold that turned into something worse," Margaret said, attempting a smile. "I am so glad you are here. I was afraid you would not come." "Of course I came," Sarah said fiercely. "You are all I have." From behind her, Henry's voice was gentle. "Mrs. Potter, why do not you show Miss Carpenter where she can wash up and rest? She has had a long journey." "No," Sarah said, not turning around. "I will stay with my sister." "Margaret needs to rest, and so do you," Henry said reasonably. "Mrs. Potter will bring you back in an hour. Your sister is not going anywhere, and neither are you. You both can stay here as long as needed." Sarah turned to look at him then, this cowboy who had employed her sister, who had cared for her when she fell ill. There was something in his face that spoke of genuine concern, of decency. She nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "Henry," he said, "we do not stand much on formality out here." Mrs. Potter led Sarah to another small bedroom upstairs, this one clearly meant for guests. A pitcher of water and a basin sat on a dresser, and the bed looked impossibly inviting. "You take your time, dear," Mrs. Potter said kindly. "I will have some food sent up, and then you can see your sister again. She has been asking for you every day. That letter she sent must have taken a while to reach you. 3 weeks, Sarah said. I came as soon as I could. Well, you are here now, and that is what matters. Your sister is a fighter. The fever broke last night, finally. She will be on the mend now, I am certain. After Mrs. Potter left, Sarah stood in the middle of the unfamiliar room, suddenly overwhelmed by the strangeness of everything. 3 weeks ago, she had been in her schoolroom, teaching arithmetic to children who seemed bored by numbers. Now she was in the New Mexico territory in a cowboy's house, her sister ill in a room below. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and she sat heavily on the bed, allowing herself a moment of weakness, but only a moment. Sarah Catherine Carpenter had been raised to be strong, to persevere. She washed her face and hands, changed into a clean dress from her trunk that someone had brought up, and brushed out her hair, pinning it back properly. By the time Mrs. Potter returned with a tray of food, Sarah looked presentable again, if tired. Henry wants you to know that you and your sister are welcome to stay as long as necessary, Mrs. Potter said as Sarah ate. The food was simple but delicious, beef and beans and fresh bread. We have plenty of room, and Margaret is a good worker when she is well. He will not turn her out, or you either. That is very generous, Sarah said, but I do not want charity. It is not charity, dear. Margaret has been earning her keep, and if you want to help while you are here, I am sure we can find something for you to do. This ranch does not run itself, and there is always more work than hands to do it. Over the next several days, Sarah fell into a routine. She spent most of her time caring for Margaret, who was indeed improving steadily now that the fever had broken. Mrs. Potter taught Sarah how to prepare the herbal teas that helped with congestion, and gradually Margaret's strength returned. In the afternoons, when Margaret was sleeping, Sarah would help Mrs. Potter in the kitchen or tend to the vegetable garden behind the house. Henry Callahan was a constant presence, though Sarah noticed he seemed to keep a respectful distance. She would see him working with the horses in the corral, or riding out with his men to check on the cattle, or doing repairs on various buildings. He was clearly a man who worked as hard as anyone he employed, not a gentleman rancher who stood back and gave orders. She admired that, though she tried not to think too much about him. On the 5th day after her arrival, Margaret was strong enough to sit up and talk properly for the first time. "Tell me why you came," Margaret said, though her eyes were knowing. "My letter must have frightened you." "You said you needed help," Sarah replied. "What was I supposed to do, stay in St. Louis and wonder?" Margaret looked down at her hands. "I was sick and scared, and I let my fear get the better of me. I should not have worried you so." "What were you afraid of?" Sarah asked gently. "Of dying alone, I suppose," Margaret admitted. "Of having no one who cared. The people here are kind, Henry especially, but they are not family. And I realized how far from home I had come, how isolated I had made myself in my quest for independence." "You are not alone," Sarah said firmly. "You will never be alone as long as I am alive." "I know that now," Margaret said, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Seeing you walk through that door, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But Sarah, you gave up your position, your whole life to come here." "A job I can find anywhere," Sarah said. "A sister I only have one of. What will you do now, go back to St. Louis?" Sarah had been thinking about that question for days. "I do not know. I spent everything I had on the journey here. It will take time to save enough for passage back, and I will need to find a position first." "You could stay," Margaret said carefully. "Henry told me that he offered for both of us to stay. There is work here, Sarah. Mrs. Potter is getting older, and she has been talking about her rheumatism more often. She could use help. And there is a school in Las Vegas that is looking for a teacher. Henry mentioned it when he rode into town yesterday." "You want to stay here?" Sarah asked, surprised. "I think I do," Margaret said. "Despite being ill, despite the hard work, I have been happier here than I was in the city. It feels like the kind of place where a woman can build a real life, not just exist. And Henry is a good man, Sarah. Fair and decent. There are not many men like that." Sarah noticed the way her sister said Henry's name with a certain softness. "Maggie, do you have feelings for him?" Margaret laughed, but there was sadness in it. "Maybe I did a little, but Henry Callahan is married to this ranch. He has no time or interest in courting, and I am just his cook. It was a silly fancy, nothing more." But Sarah wondered about that. She had seen the way Henry asked after Margaret's health every day, the genuine relief in his eyes when Mrs. Potter reported improvement. She had seen the way he brought wildflowers and left them outside Margaret's door, as if embarrassed to hand them over directly. These did not seem like the actions of a man indifferent to a woman. That evening, Sarah went looking for Henry to thank him properly for his hospitality. She found him in the barn, tending to a horse that appeared to have a cut on its leg. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his features. "Miss Carpenter, is everything all right with your sister?" "She is much better, thank you. That is actually why I came to find you. I want to thank you for everything you have done for Margaret and for welcoming me so generously. I know it must be an imposition, having unexpected guests." Henry turned back to the horse, gently cleaning the wound. "It is no imposition. Your sister is a good worker and a kind person, and you seem to be cut from the same cloth. Mrs. Potter tells me you have offered for us both to stay permanently," Sarah said. "I want you to know that I can work for my keep. I taught school in St. Louis. If there are positions available in town, I could contribute to household expenses." "I am not worried about expenses," Henry said. He finished wrapping the horse's leg and straightened, finally looking at her directly. Those dawn-colored eyes were serious, searching. "The truth is, Miss Carpenter, this ranch gets lonely. I have good men working for me, and Mrs. Potter is like family, but it is not the same as having people your own age around, people who might stay, put down roots. I would be glad to have you and your sister here, not as charity, but as something more permanent." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. Henry hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "I mean that there is room here for both of you to build lives if you want. Margaret could take over as head cook when Mrs. Potter retires, which she has been threatening to do for a year now. And you could teach in town or help with the ranch books. I am terrible at accounts, or anything else that suits you. What I am trying to say, poorly, is that you are both welcome to consider this place home for as long as you want." Sarah felt something warm bloom in her chest, gratitude mixed with something else she could not quite name. "That is incredibly generous, Henry. May I call you Henry?" "I wish you would," he said, and smiled for the first time since she had met him. The expression transformed his face, making him look younger, less careworn. Sarah realized with a start that he was probably not much older than 30, though the sun and hard work had weathered him. "Then you must call me Sarah," she said. Over the following weeks, Margaret continued to recover, growing stronger each day. The summer heat intensified, but Sarah found herself adapting to it, learning to move more slowly during the hottest parts of the day, to seek shade and drink plenty of water. She fell into the rhythms of ranch life, waking early with the sun, working through the day, falling into bed exhausted each night. Mrs. Potter did indeed need help, and Sarah found herself learning to cook in quantities she had never imagined, preparing meals for Henry and his 6 ranch hands. Margaret gradually took over more of the cooking duties as her strength returned, and Sarah shifted to helping with other tasks. She mended clothes, tended the garden, helped Mrs. Potter preserve vegetables for the coming winter. It was physical work that left her tired but satisfied in a way teaching never had. She also began to notice Henry in ways she had not before. The way he was patient with the younger ranch hands, teaching rather than berating when they made mistakes. The way he always made sure everyone else ate before he took his own plate. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, which was not often enough. The way he would sometimes stand at the corral fence at sunset, just watching the land, and Sarah wondered what he was thinking about. One evening, about a month after Sarah's arrival, she found him at that fence again. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the heat had finally broken with the setting sun. She approached slowly, not wanting to disturb him. "Beautiful, is it not?" Henry said without turning around, somehow aware of her presence. "It is," Sarah agreed, joining him at the fence. "I never saw sunsets like this in St. Louis. Everything was buildings and smoke." "Do you miss it?" he asked. "The city?" Sarah considered the question honestly. "I miss the library. And the theater, though I only went a few times. But no, I do not miss the life I had there. It was small and lonely, if I am being truthful." "Lonely in a city full of people," Henry mused. "I understand that. I have been lonely on this ranch full of cattle and horses and men." "Why is that?" Sarah asked quietly. Henry was silent for a long moment. "I built this place from nothing. Came out here 10 years ago with a stake I won in a card game and a dream that probably seemed foolish to everyone who knew me. Worked myself half to death getting the ranch established, making it profitable. And somewhere along the way I forgot to build a life, only a business." "It is not too late," Sarah said. "You are still young." 32, Henry said. "Not young exactly, but not ancient either. Still, sometimes I wonder if I let the best years pass me by, too focused on the wrong things." "I think we do what we need to survive," Sarah said. "And then, if we are lucky, we get a chance to do more than survive, to actually live." Henry turned to look at her then, and Sarah felt the weight of his gaze. "Is that what you are doing here, learning to live instead of just survive?" "Maybe," Sarah admitted. "I had not thought of it that way, but yes. Back in St. Louis I was existing, going through motions. Here everything feels more real, more vivid, like I am finally awake." "I am glad," Henry said simply. "I am glad you came, Sarah, both of you, but especially you." Before Sarah could respond, could process what that meant, one of the ranch hands called out that there was a problem with the well pump. Henry sighed and pushed away from the fence. "Duty calls," he said with a rueful smile, "but I hope we can talk more later." "I would like that," Sarah said, and meant it. As summer turned toward fall, Sarah made the journey into Las Vegas several times, and on one trip she inquired at the school about the teaching position. The town was small but growing, full of ranchers and merchants and families trying to build lives in the territory. The schoolmaster, an elderly man named Mr. Dalton, interviewed her in his small office and seemed impressed with her credentials. "The position is yours if you want it," he said. "It would start when school resumes in September. The pay is modest, but it is steady work." Sarah accepted, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. It felt like a commitment, taking this job. A statement that she was staying, putting down roots in this place so far from everything she had known. When she told Margaret and Mrs. Potter, they celebrated with a special dinner. Henry arrived late, tired from a long day moving cattle, but his face lit up when he heard the news. "That is wonderful, Sarah. Las Vegas is lucky to have you." "I will need to arrange for transportation," Sarah said. "The ride is too far to make every day on a rented horse." "I have been thinking about that," Henry said. "There is a wagon you can use and a gentle horse to pull it. You can keep them both at the stable in town during the week and come back here on weekends if you want. Or if you prefer to stay in town, I understand." "Come back here?" Sarah asked. "This is your home now," Henry said simply. "If you want it to be." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, moved by his generosity, by the way he kept opening doors for her and Margaret, offering them possibilities. "Yes," she said, "I want this to be home." September arrived and Sarah began teaching. The schoolhouse was small, one room with students ranging from 6 to 14. Some were ranchers' children who rode in from miles away. Others belonged to shopkeepers and tradesmen in town. Sarah threw herself into the work, remembering why she had loved teaching in the first place. The satisfaction of watching a child's eyes light up with understanding, the challenge of making lessons engaging, the hope of shaping young minds. She kept the wagon and horse at the stable during the week, boarding at a respectable hotel for ladies. But every Friday afternoon, as soon as school let out, she would drive back to the ranch, arriving just before sunset. And every time, Henry would be waiting, ready to help her down from the wagon, his smile warm and welcoming. Margaret had indeed taken over most of the cooking duties with Mrs. Potter now supervising rather than doing the bulk of the work. Her sister seemed happier than Sarah had ever seen her, more settled. She had even started attending the Sunday services in town. And Sarah suspected there was a rancher's son who had caught her eye, a young man named Thomas Wade who always seemed to find excuses to visit the Callahan ranch. One Friday evening in October, Sarah arrived at the ranch to find preparations underway for a cattle drive. Several of the hands would be leaving at dawn to take a herd to market in Santa Fe, a journey that would take nearly 2 weeks. Henry would be going with them, and Sarah was surprised by how much the thought of him being gone bothered her. That evening, after dinner, Henry asked if she would walk with him. They strolled toward the corral, where the horses dozed in the cool evening air. The sky was enormous overhead, stars beginning to emerge in the deepening blue. "I wanted to talk to you before I leave," Henry said, "to tell you something I have been thinking about for weeks now." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. "What is it?" "When you first arrived here, I thought you were just Margaret's sister, someone passing through who would stay a few days and then move on. But you did not move on. You stayed and you became part of this place, part of my life in a way I did not expect." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Sarah, I have been alone by choice for a long time. I told myself I was too busy building this ranch to think about anything else. But the truth is, I was afraid of letting someone in, of being vulnerable, of losing focus. And then you came and I realized I have been lonely, so lonely, and I had just gotten used to it." "Henry," Sarah whispered. "Let me finish," he said gently. "I am not a man who is good with words, so this is hard for me, but I need you to know that I have feelings for you. Real, deep feelings that keep me up at night. I think about you when I am working, wonder what you are doing, what you are thinking. I wait for Fridays like a boy waiting for Christmas. And I know this is sudden and maybe unwelcome, but before I leave, I had to tell you." Sarah's throat was tight with emotion. "It is not unwelcome." Henry turned to her, hope dawning in his eyes. "It is not. I have feelings for you too," Sarah admitted. "I tried to tell myself it was just gratitude for your kindness, but it is more than that, much more. When I am in town during the week, I miss this place. But more than that, I miss you. Your presence, your voice, the way you make me feel safe and seen." "Sarah," Henry breathed, and then he was reaching for her, his hands gentle on her face. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Sarah whispered. His lips met hers softly, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence and passion. Sarah had been kissed before, fumbling attempts by suitors in St. Louis who had bored her. This was nothing like those experiences. This was heat and light and a feeling like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "I wish you had," Sarah said, then laughed at her own boldness. They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Sarah felt like the world had shifted on its axis. Everything looked different now, charged with new meaning. At the porch steps, Henry kissed her again, longer this time, and Sarah felt desire uncurl in her belly, surprising and thrilling. "I will be back in 2 weeks," Henry said, "and when I return I want to court you properly if you will let me." "I will let you," Sarah said. "More than let you, I want that too." The 2 weeks Henry was gone felt interminable. Sarah threw herself into her teaching, into helping Margaret on the weekends, into anything that would make the time pass faster. Margaret teased her about being love-struck, but kindly, and Mrs. Potter just smiled knowingly. "About time that man found someone," the older woman said. "He has been alone too long, working himself to dust. You are good for him, Sarah. I can see it already." When Henry finally returned, dusty and tired but with a successful sale behind him, Sarah ran to meet him in a way that was probably unladylike, but she did not care. He caught her up in his arms, lifting her off her feet, and kissed her right there in front of everyone. The ranch hands whooped and hollered, and Margaret laughed delightedly. "I missed you," Henry said against her hair. "I missed you too," Sarah replied. "So much." Over the following months, Henry courted Sarah with a determination that was both endearing and overwhelming. He brought her flowers, wildflowers picked from the range elland. He took her on rides across the ranch, showing her the places he loved, the hidden valleys and streams. He talked to her about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes for the future, and asked about hers in return. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering each other in layers. Sarah learned that Henry had grown up poor in Texas, that he had worked as a cowhand for years before saving enough to strike out on his own, that he had been engaged once, briefly, to a woman who decided ranch life was not for her and left him the week before the wedding, that he loved this land with a fierce passion, saw it as both a partner and a responsibility. Henry learned that Sarah had wanted to be a writer when she was young, that she still wrote sometimes, stories and observations she kept private, that she missed her parents terribly, even years after their deaths, that she had come west not just for Margaret, but for herself too, seeking something she could not name but would know when she found it. As winter approached, everyone on the ranch could see that Sarah and Henry were deeply in love. They tried to be proper, to maintain decorum, but it was obvious in every glance, every accidental touch, every conversation that went on long after everyone else had gone to bed. In December, Thomas Wade finally worked up the courage to court Margaret properly, and she accepted with glowing happiness. The two couples would often spend evenings together, playing cards or talking, and Sarah felt a contentment she had never known. This was family, not just by blood but by choice and affection. On Christmas Eve, Henry asked Sarah to come to the barn with him. She wrapped herself in a shawl against the cold and followed him through the darkness. Inside, he had set up lanterns and had laid out blankets and cushions, creating a cozy space in the hay loft. "I wanted somewhere private," he explained. "Away from everyone else. I have something to ask you, and I wanted it to be just us." Sarah's heart hammered. "What is it?" Henry took her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling slightly. "Sarah Catherine Carpenter, I love you. I love you in a way I did not think was possible. You have brought light and warmth and meaning into my life. You have made this ranch into a home instead of just a place I work. I cannot imagine my future without you in it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring, simple gold with a small blue stone. "This was my grandmother's. It is the only thing of value I own that is not tied up in this ranch. I would be honored if you would wear it, if you would agree to be my wife." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, Henry, of course yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and they sank onto the blankets together. They kissed for a long time, growing bolder, learning each other. Henry's hands moved over her back, her sides, trembling with restraint. Sarah felt heat building in her core, want and need mixing together. "We should stop," Henry said raggedly, pulling back. "I want to do this right. Wait until we are married." "How long?" Sarah asked, equally breathless. "As long or as short as you want," Henry said. "I would marry you tomorrow if you would have me." Sarah laughed, joy bubbling up. "Let us not be quite that hasty, but soon." "Spring?" "Spring," Henry agreed. "I will wait for you, Sarah, however long it takes." They told everyone the next morning, Christmas Day, and the celebration was jubilant. Mrs. Potter cried happy tears. Margaret hugged Sarah so tightly she could barely breathe. The ranch hands congratulated Henry with genuine warmth. Even the cattle seemed to sense the joy in the air, if cattle could sense such things. Thomas Wade proposed to Margaret in February, in his own awkward but sincere way, and she accepted. The two sisters would have a double wedding, they decided, in April when the wildflowers were blooming. It seemed fitting, both of them starting their new lives together, as they had always done everything together. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations. Sarah taught during the week and spent weekends helping plan the wedding. They would hold the ceremony at the ranch, outdoors if weather permitted, with a circuit preacher Henry knew who traveled through the territory. It would be simple but meaningful, family and friends gathered to witness. Sarah's feelings for Henry deepened with every passing day. She loved his quiet strength, his integrity, his dry humor that emerged when he was comfortable. She loved the way he treated everyone with respect, from his ranch hands to the merchants in town. She loved how he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. Henry, for his part, seemed awed by Sarah's intelligence and compassion. He would watch her teach sometimes, riding into town on Saturdays to pick her up, arriving early to sit in the back of the classroom. The way she engaged the children, made learning exciting, filled him with pride. This remarkable woman had chosen him, wanted to build a life with him, and he could hardly believe his fortune. One evening in March, Sarah stayed at the ranch during the week, school being closed for a few days. After dinner, she and Henry went for their customary walk, wrapped against the chill. They found themselves at the corral again, where they had first confessed their feelings months ago. "Are you nervous?" Henry asked. "About the wedding?" "No," Sarah said honestly. "I am excited, ready. I have never been more certain of anything." "Neither have I," Henry said. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his chest, hearing his heartbeat strong and steady. "I keep thinking about all the things that had to happen for you to be here, for us to find each other. If Margaret had not gotten sick, if she had not written that letter, if you had not been brave enough to come west, I think we would have found each other somehow," Sarah said. "Some things are meant to be." "I never believed in fate before," Henry admitted, "but I do now. You were meant to come here, Sarah, to this ranch, to me, and I was meant to wait for you, even though I did not know I was waiting." The wedding day dawned clear and warm, perfect April weather. The ranch had been transformed, with wildflowers in jars everywhere, benches set up in rows, a simple arch constructed where the ceremony would take place. Guests began arriving in the morning, neighbors from surrounding ranches, friends from town, Henry's ranch hands in their Sunday best. Sarah dressed in her mother's wedding dress, which Margaret had carefully preserved and brought west. It needed only minor alterations to fit Sarah's slimmer frame. The ivory silk was yellowed slightly with age but still beautiful. Margaret wore a dress of pale blue that brought out her eyes, and both sisters helped each other with their hair and final preparations. "Are you happy, Maggie?" Sarah asked as they stood together in front of the small mirror in Sarah's room. Deliriously, Margaret replied. Thomas is a good man. Not flashy or exciting, but steady and kind. He will be a good husband and father. You want children? Sarah asked. Someday, yes, not right away. I want time with just Thomas first. But someday. What about you? Sarah thought about it. I think I do. The idea of children with Henry, little ones with his eyes or his smile, it makes my heart glad. Then we will raise our children together, Margaret said. Cousins who are close, just like we were close growing up. We will build our families side by side. When the time came, Sarah walked down the makeshift aisle on Mrs. Potter's arm, the older woman having volunteered to give both brides away. Margaret walked beside her, on the arm of Mr. Dalton, the schoolmaster. Thomas waited at the altar looking nervous but joyful. And beside him, Henry stood tall and handsome in a dark suit Sarah had never seen him wear, his eyes never leaving her face. The ceremony was short but moving. The circuit preacher spoke about love and commitment, about the challenge and joy of building a life together. When it came time for vows, Henry's voice was strong and sure. I, Henry James Callahan, take you, Sarah Catherine Carpenter, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, stand beside you in good times and hard times. I promise to build a life with you that is worthy of the gift you have given me. All that I am and all that I have is yours from this day forward. Sarah's voice shook only slightly as she made her own vows. I, Sarah Catherine Carpenter, take you, Henry James Callahan, to be my husband. I promise to love you, support you, be your partner in all things. I promise to make a home with you, to face whatever comes with courage and faith. All that I am and all that I have is yours from this day until death parts us. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that matched. And then the preacher was pronouncing them married, and Henry was kissing her, and Sarah felt joy so pure and complete she thought her heart might burst. The reception was a lively affair, with food and music and dancing. Someone had brought a fiddle, and the ranch hands took turns playing lively tunes. Sarah danced with Henry, with Thomas, with several of the older ranchers who wanted to congratulate her. Margaret glowed with happiness as Thomas held her close during a slower song. As the sun began to set, Henry pulled Sarah aside. Ready to go, they had planned to spend their wedding night in the main house, which would be theirs alone. The ranch hands would stay in the bunkhouse as always, and Margaret and Thomas would go to the small house Thomas had built on his family's property. Mrs. Potter would stay with her sister in town for a few days, giving the newlyweds privacy. Sarah nodded, suddenly nervous but excited. They said their goodbyes and made their way to the house as twilight deepened around them. Inside, Henry lit lamps while Sarah removed her shoes, her feet aching from hours of standing and dancing. "Come here," Henry said softly, holding out his hand. Sarah went to him and he pulled her close, just holding her for a long moment. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too," Sarah replied. "So much." They kissed, slow and deep, and Sarah felt desire building again, stronger than ever before. There was no need to stop now, no reason to hold back. They were married, committed to each other before God and community. Henry's hands moved to the buttons on the back of her dress, fumbling slightly. "I am afraid I am not good at this," he admitted. "Neither am I," Sarah said, laughing softly. "We will figure it out together." They did figure it out, slowly and tenderly, with patience and growing passion. Henry was gentle with her, mindful of her innocence, taking his time. Sarah discovered that her body was capable of sensations she had never imagined, that intimacy could be both vulnerable and powerful. They came together as husband and wife, and afterwards, wrapped in each other's arms, Sarah felt complete in a way she never had before. Are you all right?" Henry asked, concern in his voice. "I am perfect," Sarah replied honestly. "That was perfect." "It will get even better," Henry said, kissing her forehead. "As we learn each other, become more comfortable." "I look forward to the practice," Sarah said, and felt him laugh against her. They lay awake for hours, talking quietly, making plans. They would expand the house eventually, add more rooms for the children they hoped to have. Sarah would continue teaching as long as she wanted, and then maybe focus on writing when the time was right. Henry would gradually expand the ranch, but carefully, not letting ambition overtake sense. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Sarah continued teaching during the week, returning to the ranch on weekends. But now she came home to her husband, to their shared bed, to a partnership that felt natural and right. They fell into routines and rituals, morning coffee together when she was home, evening walks, conversations about their days. Margaret and Thomas visited often, and Sarah visited them in return. The sisters remained close, sharing their joys and concerns as they always had. In June, Margaret announced that she was expecting a baby, due in early spring. Sarah was thrilled for her sister, though she felt a small pang of envy. She and Henry had been trying in their own way, but nothing had happened yet. "It will happen when it is meant to," Henry assured her. "We have time, Sarah. There is no rush." The school year ended, and Sarah took the summer off from teaching, spending it entirely at the ranch. She loved those months, loved being with Henry every day, working side by side. She helped him with the ranch accounts, bringing order to years of haphazard record-keeping. She also started writing in earnest, stories about life in the territory, sketches of the people she met. Henry read them and declared them wonderful, encouraging her to submit them to newspapers or magazines. In September, Sarah returned to teaching, but now with a secret. Her monthly courses had not come, and she was almost certain she was pregnant. She waited another week to be sure, and then another, before finally telling Henry one evening in late September. "Are you certain?" Henry asked, his face a mixture of shock and joy. "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor," Sarah said. "But yes, I am certain." Henry whooped and picked her up, spinning her around carefully. "We are going to have a baby. Sarah, we are going to be parents." "I know," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I am excited and terrified. We will figure it out," Henry said. "Just like we have figured out everything else, together." Sarah continued teaching through the fall, though she started to tire more easily. In November, she took a leave from her position, planning to return after the baby came if she wanted to. Mr. Dalton was understanding, even helping to find a temporary replacement. Margaret had her baby in February, a healthy boy they named Robert. Sarah visited as soon as she was able, holding her nephew and marveling at the new life. Margaret looked exhausted but radiant, and Thomas was openly terrified of the tiny infant, making both sisters laugh. "Your turn soon," Margaret said. "Are you ready?" "I do not think anyone is ever really ready," Sarah said, "but yes, as ready as I can be." Sarah's time came in early April, almost exactly a year after her wedding. The labor was long and difficult, attended by Mrs. Potter and a midwife from town. Henry paced outside the bedroom, worry etched on his face. But finally, in the early hours of the morning, a baby's cry rang out, "Mrs." Potter opened the door, beaming. "You have a son, Henry, a beautiful, healthy boy, and Sarah is fine, tired but fine." Henry rushed in to find Sarah propped up in bed, holding a tiny bundle. Her face was pale and drawn, but her eyes were bright with joy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Henry approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the baby's red, scrunched face, at the tiny fingers curled into fists, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Henry breathed. "Sarah, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Sarah asked. They had discussed names for months but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Henry said, "What about James? James Henry Callahan, after my father and me." "James," Sarah repeated, trying it out. "I like it. James Henry Callahan. Welcome to the world, little one." Being parents was harder than either of them had anticipated. James was a colicky baby, crying often, sleeping irregularly. Sarah was exhausted, overwhelmed at times, struggling to recover from the birth while also caring for a newborn. Henry helped as much as he could, walking the baby at night, changing diapers, anything to ease the burden. Mrs. Potter was a godsend, providing meals and advice and occasional relief. But despite the difficulties, Sarah had never been happier. She would watch Henry holding their son, singing soft cowboy songs to soothe him, and fall in love with her husband all over again. She marveled at how this tiny human had changed everything, shifted all her priorities and perspectives. By summer, James was growing into a happier baby, smiling and cooing, sleeping more regularly. Sarah felt more like herself again, though irrevocably changed. She and Margaret would get together often, their sons only months apart, comparing notes and sharing encouragement. "I never knew it was possible to be this tired and this happy at the same time," Margaret said one afternoon as they watched the baby sleep. "I know exactly what you mean," Sarah agreed. "Sometimes I miss teaching, miss having work that was just mine. But then James smiles at me and I cannot imagine being anywhere else." "You could always go back," Margaret said. "Eventually, Thomas and I have been talking about hiring help, someone who could watch Robert during the day. You could do the same." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but not yet. Right now, I want to be here with James and Henry. I want to watch my son grow, not miss these early months." As James approached his first birthday, Sarah realized she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier in some ways, harder in others. She knew what to expect now, but she was also chasing after a toddler while growing increasingly unwieldy. Henry worried constantly, trying to get her to rest more, to let Mrs. Potter handle more of the household work. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace Ellen after both their mothers, arrived in late winter. The delivery was faster this time, and Grace was a much easier baby than James had been. She slept well, cried less, seemed content with the world. Sarah recovered more quickly and found managing 2 children, while challenging, not as overwhelming as she had feared. Henry was utterly besotted with his daughter. He would hold her for hours, just gazing at her tiny face, marveling at her existence. "I did not know," he told Sarah one evening. "I did not know my heart could hold this much." "Neither did I," Sarah said softly. Margaret had another baby too, a daughter named Caroline. The cousins were growing up together, playing in the dirt of the ranch yards, learning to walk and talk. Sarah looked at her life and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had come west looking for her sister, scared and uncertain. She had found so much more: a home, a husband, a family, a community, a life that was full and rich and meaningful. One evening, when Grace was about 6 months old, Sarah and Henry stood on the porch watching the sunset as they had done countless times before. James was playing at their feet, babbling to himself. Grace was asleep in Sarah's arms. "You ever think about that first day?" Henry asked. "When you rode up here, dusty and desperate, looking for Margaret?" "All the time," Sarah admitted. "I was so scared that day. Scared for Maggie, scared about what I would find. I never imagined any of this. I took one look at you and thought you were the most determined woman I had ever seen," Henry said. "And then I got to know you and realized you were also the kindest, smartest, most beautiful woman I had ever met. And somehow, miraculously, you chose me." "It was not a difficult choice," Sarah said, leaning against him. "You told me that Margaret and I could both stay forever. That offer changed my life, Henry. It gave me a place to belong, a reason to put down roots. And somewhere along the way, it stopped being about refuge and started being about love." "I meant it," Henry said. "The forever part. I want forever with you, Sarah. As many years as we are given, I want to spend them all with you." "You have me," Sarah promised, "for all the forevers to come." They stood there as the sky deepened from gold to pink to purple, their children safe and happy, their life together stretching out before them. The ranch that had started as Henry's dream had become their shared reality, a place where two sisters had found not just shelter, but home. Where a lonely cowboy had found love and family. Where everything that mattered was gathered in one place, under the endless New Mexico sky. Years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and joys. The ranch prospered under Henry's management and Sarah's organizational skills. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, good years and lean years. They added 2 more children to their family, another son named William and a daughter named Margaret after Sarah's sister, though they called her Molly to avoid confusion. Sarah eventually returned to teaching part-time, with Mrs. Potter and a young woman from town helping to watch the children. She also began publishing her stories, essays about life in the territory that appeared in various newspapers and magazines. It was not a large income, but it was hers, earned by her words and ideas, and it filled her with pride. Margaret and Thomas had 4 children in total and remained on their neighboring ranch. The 2 families were intertwined, celebrating every holiday and milestone together. The children grew up more like siblings than cousins, a tight-knit group that roamed the rangelands with the fearlessness of youth. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Henry took Sarah on a trip to Santa Fe, their first journey away from the ranch and children since their marriage. It felt strange at first, being just the 2 of them again, but also wonderful. They stayed in a hotel, ate in restaurants, walked through the plaza hand in hand like young courting couples. "I would do it all again," Sarah said as they stood looking at the stars from the hotel balcony. "Every moment, every choice that led me here to you. I would do it all exactly the same. Even the hard parts," Henry asked. "The times we struggled, the arguments, the exhaustion. Especially those parts," Sarah said, "because they made the good parts even sweeter. Because they taught us how to be partners, how to support each other. We built this marriage, Henry. We chose each other every day, not just on our wedding day." "I love you more now than I did then," Henry said. "I did not think that was possible, but I do. Every year, every day, I love you more." They returned to the ranch renewed, grateful for both the break and the homecoming. The children mobbed them at the door, full of stories about what had happened while they were gone. Life resumed its familiar rhythms, busy and full and occasionally overwhelming, but underpinned always by love and commitment. As their children grew older and more independent, Sarah and Henry found they had more time for each other again. They would take rides across the ranch, just the 2 of them, reminiscing about earlier days. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands, watching the sunsets that never got old. They would make love with the comfortable intimacy of longtime partners, who knew each other's bodies as well as their own. James grew into a young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did, clearly meant to inherit and continue the legacy Henry had built. Grace was quieter, bookish like her mother, dreaming of college back east. William was adventurous, talking about exploring other territories. Molly was still young enough that her future was unwritten, but she showed signs of her mother's teaching gift. On a warm summer evening when Sarah was 40 and Henry 48, they sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. James was teaching William how to rope a fence post. Grace was reading to Molly under a tree. Margaret and Thomas were visiting, their children mixed in with the chaos and laughter. "We did good," Henry said softly. "Look at all this, Sarah. Look at what we built." "We did very good," Sarah agreed. She thought about that frightened young woman who had arrived at this ranch so many years ago, desperate and uncertain. She thought about how she had been searching for her sister but found a home, how she had expected temporary refuge but found forever. "Do you remember what you said that first day?" Sarah asked. "You said Margaret and I could both stay forever." "I remember," Henry said. "Best offer I ever made. Best offer I ever accepted," Sarah replied. She looked at her husband, his face weathered by sun and time but still handsome to her, his eyes still that unique dawn color that had captured her heart. She looked at her children, healthy and happy, products of love and commitment. She looked at her sister, her oldest friend and companion, who had led her to this life even without meaning to. "I found everything I was looking for," Sarah said, "and so much more I did not even know to look for. I found home, Henry. I found love. I found myself. All because I came to this ranch looking for my sister, and you told us we could stay." "Forever," Henry said, pulling her close. "You can stay forever, Sarah. You and all of this, everything we have built together, this is our forever." And it was. Through all the years that followed, through children growing up and leaving and coming back, through grandchildren arriving and filling the ranch with new life, through aging and changing and adapting, through everything that life brought them, Sarah and Henry stayed. They kept their promises to each other, loved each other through every season, built a legacy that was about so much more than land or cattle or success. They built a family. They built a home. They built forever, one day at a time together. And when they were very old, sitting on that same porch where they had shared so many moments, watching yet another sunset paint the New Mexico sky, Sarah would take Henry's weathered hand in hers and know that she had been blessed beyond measure. That frightened journey west, that desperate search for her sister, had led her to everything that mattered. "Thank you," she whispered to Henry one evening when the light was golden and perfect. "For what?" he asked, though his eyes were knowing. "For telling me I could stay," Sarah said. "For giving me a home, for loving me, for all of this." "Thank you for staying," Henry replied. "For choosing this life, this place, me, for building forever with me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon, secure in their love, grateful for their life, content with every choice that had brought them to this moment. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and enduring. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across it, carrying on traditions and creating new ones. Margaret and Thomas lived just over the hill, still close after all these years. Everything was as it should be. Everything had worked out better than Sarah could have dreamed that dusty day she rode up to the ranch, desperate and afraid. She had come looking for her sister. She had found a cowboy who told her they could both stay forever. And she had taken him up on that offer, building a life more full and rich and meaningful than anything she had imagined possible. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Sarah leaned her head on Henry's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart, the warmth of his presence. This was home. This was love. This was forever, exactly as promised, exactly as it was always meant to be.